Welcome, everyone, to Give a Shift, the podcast you want to be listening to for positive, radical change in your life. We're so excited you're here, and we want you to know that our mission is to bring you stories of inspiration, motivation, along with information that can help you make the shifts in your life, big or small, so you can create a life, the health and body you feel fantastic living in. Before we get started, we do want to thank our sponsor, Purium. The quality of the food you eat equals the quality of the life that you live. Purium offers simplified nutrition to help you fill in those gaps. Both our podcast and our health is powered by Purium. So if you have any interest, we'll have information on Purium in the show notes along with a $50 discount code. And with that, I am Nancy Leeds Gribble, one of the co-hosts.
And I'm your other co-host, Alicia Ziegler.
Yay! And today we welcome Tammy Faulds. And I am going to read Tammy's bio, and then we will get going. So since 2010, Tammy has been utilizing her heart-expanding and holistic coaching skills to guide people through loss to life. Being an avid learner, Tammy has continued, I loved this, to tickle her gray matter and has earned her certifications as a life coach, death doula, grief specialist, and yoga and meditation teacher. However, Tammy's education really began at the innocent age of 6 when she received a cancer diagnosis. And over the years, whether it's for her annual oncology appointments, while working with seniors as they candidly share some of life's regrets, or sitting beside with loved ones in extremis, did I say that right?
Yeah.
She's constantly reminded that life and the death that will inevitably come is precious. And Tammy finds this fascinating, liberating, in fact, because death needn't be feared. In fact, death is just misunderstood, and it's screaming to be heard because it knows it can truly teach us how to live out life in a way that no book, no movie, and no TED Talk can. But we have cold feet and we're too scared to have the conversation, which is why Tammy's made it her duty to lovingly facilitate these heart-centered conversations, and why Tammy's made death her life's work. Welcome, Tammy. Super fascinated.
Yes, well, thank
I'm
you.
so excited you're here.
Well, that's why I'm so excited to be here, because we need to be having these conversations. Spoiler alert, we're all going to die one day.
Spoiler alert, right?
Those stats never change. And when you think about the shifts that I have made to get to this point, I'm like, how long do we have? Because it's one of those things I've always just been fascinated by, and why I talk about my cancer diagnosis as a child, because I think that's when my shift started, to be honest. Probably not conscious at age 6, but when I go for those yearly checkups, and I'm constantly reminded of the fragility of life, it really does empower me to live, a life that's aligned with my values, that feels fulfilling. I mean, obviously not every day I'm getting out of bed and like, this could be the last day, but it really is a motivator. And that's why I have conversations about how, and as we've all lived through the pandemic, right? A lot of people made a lot of shifts with that brush of death. So that's why I'm excited just to be here and have a conversation about grief and loss and death, all these taboo topics that, again, we all experience. You can't get through life without loss.
Yeah.
And there's such liberation in being able to talk about it. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Of course. I think, and that's how I found you. Yes. We have mutual friends. And at the time, I think I had been struggling pretty heavily in an abusive relationship, but most of it was stemming from just a self-worth of chasing what we will, lack of a better word, daddy issues. But a lot of that was pretty much unprocessed grief, right? I think it was a lot of like I'm fine. I'm okay. And that's just how I walked around, because for me, it was at 10 when it started. And then thereafter was the domino effect of loss. And so for me, it seemed normal, but probably the same as you were saying. It's not really that conscious thing. You're like, well, I guess everybody's just going to die. And it kind of was like, had this stigma and this like weird thing, but I was like, well, whatever. But that whatever is like, well, you kind of still got to process the whatever.
Yeah. We try to use our heads to heal our hearts.
And there it is. I mean, that's
right. And we're told, be strong. Oh, they're in a better place, or keeping busy, or if it's, a pet that dies, which is devastating, get another dog. And you're like, that doesn't honor anything that I'm feeling. And if anything, it just shrinks me down and makes me feel like I shouldn't talk about this. I should probably isolate. No one understands. And exactly. So the more we can be here and talk about it, the more liberation we experience because of that, because we're actually able to move that energy, because grief, like any other emotion, just wants to be seen and heard and know it matters. But we're taught, no, sub-basement of the soul. Like, let's not talk about that at all.
Right. Yeah. Hurry up. The move on. Fix it. Yeah. I just lost my soulmate dog in November, on November 29th. And I was like, it's been 2 months, 2 days. But I was like, don't ask me if I'm getting another dog, because the answer is no. So I'm processing the fact that my boy's not here. And I have learned that every day is, if it comes, write it, process it, but I know that you didn't start necessarily with the grief. So what took you from what you were doing to this niche, really?
Yeah, I had started officially my coaching journey in 2010. I look back on my life, I'm like, I've always been that face that people just open up and tell stuff to. Now I'm just joking, like, now I'm going to slide you an invoice. However, I started in life coaching, and that's when I came to California, was to do my my yoga training. I'm in Toronto, Canada. We used to have really harsh winters. So I was like, I'm going to go to California for the winter. I'm going to do my training there. And I loved it. And that then became a very holistic approach to coaching. So I really was mind, body, spirit, and still to this day. And as I started coaching people, I started, just I'm a naturally curious person. And this was around the time, but 5 years after I started, Brene Brown hit the scene.
Nice.
What is this woman talking about? Vulnerability and shame. She's wrapping language around everything I've been feeling. So I trained in Texas with her, and then I layered that on, and that kind of got people even deeper. And again, still use obviously her tools and that to this day. And then as I was getting deeper with people in coaching, things that, say you're an entrepreneur or you want to become an entrepreneur, you're like, oh, but if I do that, I'll fail, and then I'll end up living, under the highway and get eaten by coyotes. Like, that's kind of where our goes, right? There was this fear of death that kept just like circling like a shark in the periphery. And I was like, what's this death thing about? Because again, since a young age, I've always had to dance with death. So I've always been very comfortable talking about it. And then I started looking at, well, what is this? And I actually labeled myself as a death coach for a while, but using, again, death as a tool to show you how in alignment or out of alignment you are with your life. Because if it all were to end tomorrow, would there be regrets? Would there be relationships? Were there things that have been said? All these things. So I got into death that way, and I was a hit at parties. People actually talking about
DC's here. Let's go get her. Bottoms up.
Kind of like, but it'd be more of the corner conversation of like, well, what do you think happens when you die? Like, what, you think we go on? So people were really interested in it. But I was trying at that time to marry my event planning background, because I've been doing professional events for 20 years. I was like, oh, maybe I'll help people, get their paperwork together, like you're planning for your funeral or whatever that is. And it always just felt very arm's length. So then that's how I got into grief, because grief became the thing that people can go, oh, I know, I've had my heart broken. and knowing that grief just isn't with death. Death,
Right.
divorce, diagnosis are kind of the big three. Displacement as well, so loss of job or a move or a disaster, things like that happen. But there's over 40 types of loss that can generate feelings of grief. So that became more of the landing, or like the runway for people to be like, oh, okay, I get that. And then of course, as you start understanding grief and the misinformation out there about it and how we live in just such a grief illiterate society, the more you kind of learn, you get really curious. You're like, this is actually fascinating. I'm learning so much more about myself and how I can start making healthier choices and that for myself. So now death's kind of coming back around again, but it was through this, again, this like little wave of death and grief and loss that kind of all danced together.
Wow. That's like how to make death cool again. I'm one of those people, and I don't know, and it's probably the same as you, that even though I did it through the loss of my dad, I am one of those people that when I joke that like, oh yeah, I'd have regret, but it's so true. Because I really do kind of be like, I'm getting in the car, like this could be it. Like, not to be morbid, but it's like, it's true, right? It's like, we don't want to be morose, but like at the end of the day, it is that. And no matter what it is, whether it is a job or it is something that you didn't get, or a death of a relationship, and it's very fascinating to be discovering yourself and how you deal with it and others. Like I've been in a relationship where it ended because one day I was like, what? He was like, I don't need to give you a kiss goodbye. And I was like, well, I might not see you again. And for him, it was so off-putting. And for me, it was my normal.
Yeah.
Right. And so to have a conversation like you must have all the time must just be first fascinating.
100%. I love my job.
Yeah. And I wonder if is it more, do you find people in their current instances, or have you noticed that it really does have a launch pad back from something sooner?
Yeah. Well, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, well, I'm sure people compile, right? Nancy's been through some diggers, as we call them too, but yeah, always right. There's, I'm sure an OI somewhere back in there.
Oh my gosh, it goes back. And so I have a clients who are just talking to about this, how much goes back to, not surprisingly, childhood loss, right? And our first heartbreaks, oh, it's puppy love, and it kind of gets again dismissed. And you're like, you're devastated. Or for a lot of kids, it's the death of a pet, when they're kids. And they're like, again, just get another dog. It's fine. So thinking of, this is the analogy that we give, is that we're born, right? We come out, actually from the moment we're born, we experience loss. We come out of the cozy womb of our mother to this bright world that's cold and scary. But even things like, when you lose your binky or your favorite toy, or like it starts quite early. But we think about, you're put on this path of your life, your own unique individual path. And losses are these rocks that you just kind of that right along the way. So yeah, maybe childhood, you moved, or your parents got divorced, or you didn't make the soccer team. And these are all just losses that you're like, some are rocks, that are like, maybe the soccer team wasn't a huge one, but your parents' divorce is more like a boulder. But we weren't taught what to do with loss. We're taught how to get things, how to get the job, the marriage, all the house. But when we lose those things, there's no support really around that. So we just kind of throw it in our emotional backpack.
I was like, oh my God,
very heavy, that backpack.
I'm panicking. I'm like, oh.
Exactly. But that's the thing. We're just putting all these rocks in. And then actually, that's the physical manifestation, right? You're exhausted. You can't think straight. It's because you're constantly, laboring yourself through with all this unresolved grief that's just sitting on you. And that's where I say, like, the neck is literally the bottleneck of the body. And that's where we get so choked up, because if our grief backpack is filled up to here, right? And like when we want to talk, and then note, we stuff it down. We keep stuffing it down and stuffing it down. And then turn up the heat on that with something like a pandemic, that globally we're dealing with a loss of community, routines, safety, trust, jobs, like everything,
health,
in a very short time. And we're expected to just be fine, keep on and carry on. And, and everyone felt that. And so I love Harvard Business Review came out with an article, I think it was in 2021, but they're like, that uncomfortable feeling, it's grief. And then people are like, oh, because I thought it was just death. But no, it's all these cumulative losses that again just pile up over time. So that's the process I take people through, is like, okay, let's look at those boulders, honor them, see them, acknowledge them, and listen to them. Yeah. And then so that we can choose to put that behind us and then move forward.
So people that come and work with you, are they coming in through the life coaching door or the I'm in death grief door, or both? And then you help them sort out, because obviously I think people off the cuff, right, think, oh, grief coach, when so-and-so dies, that's who I'm going to call. And so they don't think, oh, I'm going to need help with my life right away. Like usually down the road, they start thinking that. But you have both. They come in through the door. And so when you have people coming in on the life coaching, and then you're like, let's discuss loss, they might go, I don't have any loss. Nobody's died,
it's
right?
interesting. And it's a great question, because previously it would have been that. It would have been more coming in for life. And then as we get talking, they're like, oh shit, there's actually a ton of grief here. And then we'll pivot and move to that. But now that I'm more known as a grief coach, then people are coming through that. But to your point, it doesn't matter if the grief is recent or long ago. You know, like I have a client whose partner died on Christmas Day, and here we are, you know, heading into February. So she was like, I'm getting on this. Others are, my partner, you know, left me 5 years ago. I have not been able to get over this divorce, and they come later. So it's never too soon or too late to do the healing work for your heart, because again, we just live in this society that tells us time will heal all.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah. And I think there's people that don't even know that they're holding on to grief. I have a few people I'm thinking of, and it's a loss of divorced parents. And the one parent has other kids, starts a whole new family. And maybe the child from the first family, this is not me, by the way, the child from the, it could be, but it's not. But the child from the first family has suddenly not only felt the loss, but is watching the other family kind of have what he thought he should have. And so, but never connects that all the things going on in life are back to that. I know both Alicia and I do, you know, I don't do life coaching, but, you know, health coaching and stuff. And I can see, like, you know, a lot of times the weight or all these other health issues has nothing to do with can you eat better? It's like you've got something in there. Do you encounter like people that come and they uncover like, oh my gosh, that was a real loss and I never thought about it?
100%. And people going off meds after doing the emotional work, which isn't surprising, you know?
Yeah.
And actually there's been studies coming out more recently around anxiety and depression being misdiagnosed. It's actually unresolved grief.
Trauma.
Yeah. Right. Because that's all just energy that's just being kept down in there. And again, body keeps score, right? So it's like,
okay. What a great book. Yeah. Well, it was making me think too, like when Nancy, you were saying that, I thought, I wonder how many people come to you and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's Chip. Like the bitterness or the characteristic where they're like the way that they're just existing or acting, and they are just showing up like, yeah, I'm just going to throw my shit on the table and we'll just decipher and go through it. And you're like, wow, your whole being is radiating like, we got to process whatever happened way back yonder when you didn't get through. I mean, even as an actor, there are times where I've shown up on set and I'm like, oh God, was that the play in third grade when she told me I walked weird and I'm having trauma and I'm 30 years later, like, calm down, breathe. Like there's so much stuff that could be your trigger. So I can only imagine when people come to you, what is one of the first places that you like to start with someone?
Good question.
Honestly, it's education, because we weren't taught. And that's why there's just zero judgment, critique, analysis of anyone's story. Everyone's unique and individual, and your grief is going to be unique and individual to you. Right. So, Alicia, you and I are sisters, and our brother dies, your response could be vastly different from mine. And that's okay. So we start always with that awareness piece of, well, how is it showing up for you? Where are you even feeling it? Some people it is like they're oversleeping, or some can't sleep at all. We think about the physicality, or I'm overeating or undereating, or but just understanding the myths that are out there around grief. So we've touched on a few already, but the time heals all is probably the biggest one. And now it's one of those things, like Maya Angelou says, once you know better, you do better. Once you understand that time doesn't heal, you'll start, at least I do anyway, raise my fist, when I watch TV shows. They're like, oh, just give it time. I'm like, no, it doesn't work. Because again, that's our heads trying to, right? Yeah, like just fast forward. And so there's that. There's my personal favorite is keeping busy, throw myself into work, throw myself into anything else but feeling what needs to be felt.
Yeah, but feeling. Super helpful.
Yeah. But even, and that's the thing, I teach people the hows of that, because okay, well, I know I should sit with it. What does it mean to sit with my feelings, and then, replacing the loss, or whether it's like get a new boyfriend, best way to get over someone's get under someone.
Yeah, exactly.
These things that you're taught, or that are said to you, that just, again, don't honor what's happening in your heart. And then, grieve alone. So give them time, just, they need to be by themselves. I'll reach out in a couple of weeks, and then a month goes by, and then 6 months. And then, oh, I never did reach out to Alicia when her dad died. And then that shame kicks in of like, oh God, I'm a horrible friend, So again, just understanding all these things. And then we talk also about, mindfulness around comfort and numbing. It's a very thin line. So eating a few squares of chocolate for me, comforting, love it. If I eat the whole bar and don't even remember consuming it, it's probably leaning a little more towards numbing, So it's just understanding.
That's really good. I'm making notes. I like that one.
She's gonna write it down.
Yeah, I'll be like, then you feel again, there's zero judgment on it. It's just understanding what uniquely you would turn to, because we all need coping mechanisms. We all need comfort. But when is it tipping over to maybe avoidance? That you're like, I don't want to feel any of this, so I'll just have another glass of wine.
Yeah.
Or a lot of people, or my clients will say, like, they just throw themselves into work. That was 100% mine before I understood grief more. Be like, because I don't want to go home, because that's where it's quiet. And then that's when the emotions come up. So that's where we always start, is just really, because awareness is enough. Awareness will help you go, yeah, this person, again, clients who say, I just want to punch them in the nose at the funeral if I have one more person say, I'm so sorry for your loss. But they know that they're just saying that because that's what we're taught, these platitudes. And if people haven't processed their own pain and grief, they don't have space for theirs. They sure as heck don't have space for yours.
Right.
So that's why we kind of just push and like, oh, I'm so sorry. If you need anything, let me know. Right. And then that you're just like,
yeah, you're like, if I don't reach out on a regular day, I'm certainly not going to reach out on my grief days.
Yeah.
Let me just call you and burden you with all my shit. So really.
Yeah. And that's why, when people often ask me, well, what can I do to support? Be specific, show up, right? So pick up the kids from school, take the dog for a walk, mow the lawn, whatever, like just show up and do these things that are supportive to your friends, right? You'll know your people well enough that you're like, oh, because our default is, the casserole or the flowers.
I'm the organized cleaner. I'll show up and start cleaning your house, get your
Exactly.
let's clean your space at least if you're gonna sit in it.
Exactly. And that's the thing, everyone knows what their strengths are, right? Like, I'm a planner, so I'll get the people together and we'll take you out for dinner, if that's what you want to do. So that specificity, instead of defaulting to, like you're saying, call me, no one's going to call. They can't even, navigate the next hour, let alone thinking about, well, how can Alicia help me right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had that thought.
Yeah, take the pressure off. They got enough on their plate. So
very true. Very true. The call me if you need me is probably the one people hear the most, and it's so true. It's like they're not going to call. Like they're just trying to tread water and keep their head afloat, right? And like not call.
The Uber Eats card is my favorite go-to now.
The Uber
Here
Eats.
you go. Like send them a gift card for Uber Eats, and that way it's like when they're hungry, they have it, and if they don't use it for a year, it's fine. You know.
Yeah.
It's there if you need it. Yeah.
Or I'm just gonna say you happen to be vegan, and then everybody sends you all the meat casseroles.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah. There's some full freezers.
Super helpful.
Well, that's actually why I started. I just launched in the fall grief gift boxes, because exactly that. I have so many clients that are like, Tammy, everyone's gone by week 2. So after the funeral, it's super quiet. So these boxes, I jokingly say, go beyond the casserole. You know, we can do better for our loved ones. And in there, just all these holistic, you know, eco-friendly products, as well as I curate playlists. Like I theme the boxes. So playlists and workbooks that go along with them. So there's a constant companion throughout that journey, along with all the self-care, you know, pieces that you need.
I loved seeing that too, because I immediately called my mom, because she has, in the last couple of years, lost her mom, and then my grandpa 2 years ago, and then 2 horses out of nowhere back to back in a month, like her babies. And she was experiencing grief at, you know, she finally came to me and was like, I understand what was going on with you at 10. Like that was a lot. And I'm like, and now she's being hit. And so she has volunteered her time to be at Grief Share.
Yes.
And she is kind of like you in the like, okay, this person needs to get this done on their house. So who in Grief Share can do this? Okay, this person's going to need meals for a week. I'll be cooking for them. But I was like, I think mom needs to connect with Tammy, because this is what she was trying to do. But she's like kind of been doing it on her own. But she was like, it's so beautiful to be able to be there with somebody during this really unique time. It's very spiritual. It's very beautiful. It's very healing for yourself to be selfless in that respect. But she's also like, can we just move beyond the meals? Because the person's going to need you for like the next 3 to 6 months minimum. So like we need to have a Grief Share reunion in 2 weeks and make sure everybody comes to dinner. Like, and it was that thought process of we really do as a society. It's like that microwave mentality of like, well, and you know, a couple of weeks, you'll start to get over it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not getting over it. And now my attitude's showing, and my house is showing it, and my work is showing, like, and I don't have, my friends aren't really calling because they want me to call them and reach out. Like, it's a huge service that you're doing. And I think offering these comforting boxes, I loved it that they were so tailored specifically to an individual, because that really makes you feel seen and heard. And I think in your lowest point of going through grief, that's kind of all you really want, right? Is like little moments are so, and for lack of a better word, I'll say sexy. Like they just make you feel so like, thank you so much. It means so much to me. So what led you to create the gift and the boxes?
Well, exactly that. Clients just saying, my freezer's full, the flowers die, I feel all alone.
Still like, alone and empty.
I've got to be able to do better than this.
And how many flowers can we really have in our house? I mean, honestly, flowers.
And they'll often comment too, and I know I've had that as well. It's like, and the flowers die. So when they die, you're kind of like reminded of
that. Yeah, I'm like, you can send a plant and then it's going to die. And I'm like double guilty because I didn't keep the plant alive. The flowers are already going to die. We're just compiling grief on grief.
Exactly. And that's why I wanted it to be a multi-sensorial experience, right? So there's things that smell good. There's, chocolate, right? Because again, but like thing, and then the playlist. So music, because sometimes words just don't cut it. And you just need, like the one playlist I put together for the Lean On Me box is just like, it starts off, like, let's get some tears rolling. And then by the end, it's all like, I want to see you be brave. Like, so it's this, you can kind of pick and choose, the mood you're in, and just to have that support along, because it's in waves, right? Like grief isn't linear. It's going to sometimes hit like a tsunami, and other times maybe ebb around your ankles. But these are the different ways you can kind of support yourself through it. You know?
Yeah. That's what I've always said. It's like the waves of the ocean. Like and it doesn't matter how long. You could just be driving along, and it's like, oh my god. And
a song comes on.
A song comes on, right? And all the memories come, and you start flooding with tears. We were actually, I think Alicia and I were talking a week or two ago, like the car is such a great place to let out feelings. I don't know why that is, but I know for me, I just would get in my car and drive and scream and cry and do all the things that I wouldn't even do at my house. Now I have my son at home, so that probably was some of it. But I mean, it was like, nobody can hear me. It's great.
I just wrote that as the first line of my book. I was like, so my best therapy happens on a run and in the front seat of my car.
Yeah.
Me and the steering wheel.
100%.
I think it's because it's also smaller than your home. It's yours. It's private. It's, you know.
I've done many clients have called from their car because that's where they feel safe, right? Because again, you don't want people listening in, you know, at home or at the office, so they'll call from their car.
Yeah, and it can be however long. It's the term move on. I'm like, I'm moving forward, but I'm not moving on. My husband, my fiance, they're always a part of my life. They're always a part of my life, and I don't move on from them. But I am moving forward with my life. But they're still in it. They're still in my heart. They're still in all the places. I just wanted to say, like, things that people say. I think two of the worst, this is my opinion, is when someone has had a diagnosis and they've had it for a while and then they pass away and people are like, well, you expected it. You knew it was coming. Really? Does that mean I don't feel anything, that they're suddenly not in my life? Or it's a shocker, right? It's a instant, it's tragic, it's all the thing. At least it was quick. This made me feel better. Do these things make people feel better? And I'm sure you hear that, but I'm like, I tell people, I'm like, please don't say that. Please don't say either one of those ever.
Yeah, 100%. And exactly that, because it just negates the feeling.
Yeah.
Right? It like one of the, you know, if I don't feel bad, they wouldn't want you to feel bad. And you're like, I feel horrible.
Yeah.
Are you telling me I shouldn't feel this way? Right. And again, just like you can just
they wouldn't want you to feel bad. Well, I was telling my family, I do want all of you to feel bad for a while. I really do. I want you all to miss me, and you can have a celebration of life, but could you mourn me? Like, I don't know if I want you to be happy. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm laughing. I'm going to put a note to send you.
I want them to be happy, but miss me.
The worse you feel, the more important I know I was. So you better be like on this train for a long time.
I'm going to send you put it in the notes. There's a reel that this woman did with Barbies, and it's exactly that. She's like, I want you wailing. You should be throwing on the ground, and this could be like,
well, I'm like,
what her funeral's going to be. It's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, you know, people, it's the celebration of life, and I'm all for that. But I'm like, listen, I expect some sadness. Yeah. I expect you people to be like, this is tragic that she's gone.
Yeah.
Like, we're not jumping right into woohoo.
Yeah. No, we're not bypassing any of that. Yeah. But exactly. And this is why having new conversations about what your wishes are, just like people have a birth plan, having a death plan doesn't mean it's all going to go to exact, you know, you're going to have the venue you want and the flowers are available or whatever.
Right.
But really communicating just what's important to you, you know, to your loved ones, to be like, hey, if and when the time comes, as of right now, I would love, for it to be a dance party, or I would love for it to have a yoga class, or, you know, whatever, or this type of speaker, or I have a funeral jams playlist. Like everyone knows Prince, Let's Go Crazy is my number one when it kicks off to the dance party portion, right?
Yeah. Like, are we wearing purple, or what are we doing, girl? I'll be there.
Color, whatever.
I'll make sure your plan happens.
But you know what I mean? Like, because there's nothing more heartbreaking for me than going to cookie cutter, you know, I remember one time I went to this funeral home, there were 5 funerals happening at the same time. And they're like, oh, you're here for Joan, Ricky, or I'm just like, no, Sandy, you know, down the hallway. And again, that's also why I launched a celebration of life planning service, because traditional funerals are like traditional weddings are kind of going by the wayside. People, especially since the pandemic where we were forced to not have in-person gatherings, people are looking for more creative ways to again, like obviously honor and the grief and the emotion, everything that comes up there, and the celebration of the life that was well lived. How can we do that in a way that feels like we're really just that uniqueness of that person, that individuality is coming, it's right through to the end, so not just here's the crustless sandwiches and the pinwheel, cucumber, like, no, they love the Texas barbecue, right? Like we're going to have that instead of the crustless sandwiches, like those little things we can do to really honor the people, that we love and want to see them, so that when you are at that celebration, or memorial, whatever you want to call it, you feel connected.
Yeah.
But then again, not like I'm at that one where there's 5 happening at the same time. I'm like, okay, well, I want to, make sure that people knew my love of Prince and can, sing along to the song and that sort of thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
So do you offer that aspect when someone comes with you? Like, I come to you for life coaching and then we go through the whole course and then we plan that for myself, or is that just something that you do optional?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's up to the person, right? And some will come through, again, we just launched in November, but some will come through if they want to just plan. Yeah. Because they're like, you know what? And I mean, here in Canada, medical assistance in dying it's been around since 2016. So I've actually had people who have that terminal diagnosis and they want to have a living funeral. So what would that look like? How do I gather people so that I can hear what they're actually saying about me?
That's cool.
And having it after. So again, it's just that individual's needs, whatever they are looking for. But that's where I get to tag into my event planning.
It's perfect. It's perfect. I'm curious because part of in the bio, it's like, people living well now, like, right. That's part of the life coaching. So I have a feeling you say it in a much softer and nicer and nurturing way than I say it. I'm like, one life, people, come on, let's go. We got to get healthy. We got to do things.
Like, what the heck is your problem?
We're like, come on, but that is my thing. One life. Like this isn't a dress rehearsal. Like if you got stuff things you want to try, if you need to get healthier, if you feel you're stuck and you're bored, figure it out, because you don't get to come back and as this person and do it all again. So you have the grief coaching. How do you help people with that part of it, the life part of it?
Well, and I'll actually make a note for that too. I have an email series that people can download, but I call it your epic exit party. And
I want an epic exit.
I know. All of a sudden I got nervous. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get off this call and be like, Nancy, we're not doing enough.
No, so that one's for what might your funeral look like. And then the other freebie I have is live a life you'll be proud to leave.
Yeah.
So that's the one with more of the questions around, and it's just journaling prompts. And again, both these are free. I'll give you the links for both. But the live a life you'd be proud to leave, just ask those questions, which are kind of built around, regrets of the dying, which are often, I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I spent more time nurturing my relationships and spending time with the people I love. So these questions are kind of around that, because when we think about the big shifts, I knew in my soul at a young age, I needed to go to Australia. To this day, I still can't tell you why. It was just something that was factory installed in me, I guess, when I was born. And I just knew that I had to go do that. But it was actually, I was working with senior citizens at the time. And I just surveyed them. I'm 25 years old. I said, hey, you guys have been, you lived through the Depression. You've had these crazy lives. What advice would you give to a 25-year-old? And 100% of them were travel.
Yes.
Do it now. And so I really do credit them with giving me that live a life you're going to be proud to leave, because all of them were like, Tammy, if there's one regret we have, it's that we thought we would retire and then travel, but then health had other, plans for us or that sort of thing. So I did that right at 25. I took off to Australia for a year. traveled, did all the things. And that moment, I was like, wow, this is something that everyone needs to think about, you know? Are there going to be is there anything I can do now that will help prevent me having a deathbed regret of, you know what, I never wrote the book.
Oh, she's looking at you.
I know. She knows. This is like 13 years in the making. Come on my 87th draft.
Right? Or yeah, I didn't go to Africa. I didn't.
I know. I got Kilimanjaro. I mean,
yeah. It's that part is very true. I just recently got remarried, and we talked about that. And I said, I was a single mom for the whole time my son was young. I mean, just that was what I did. And I'm like, I haven't traveled. I haven't been to Italy. I haven't been to these places. And I'm like, they're going on the list, whatever money we have, however it happens. Like, I have got to get to some of these places. Africa's right up there too.
Well, Italy's on mine. So
yeah,
but exactly,
but it's so true, right? Memories over
material,
whatever else. It's like gifts, right? It's like, let's make the memories now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what that guidebook just sort of helps you with, is that you just journal about these different questions, you know.
I'm gonna do it. I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it, but then I'm gonna check in with Tammy. I'm gonna be like, okay, I did it.
Yeah. I love that you have both sides of the coin. Yeah. I really do. You know, you have to, you know, we acknowledge the death, we acknowledge the grief, you work through that, with that, all the ways that you need to. And then we also you have to live life, you know, however the grief passes and whatever. And this is how you can do it. And I love that you have both of that. You don't have that combination very often. Yeah, I don't think, you know, with a life coach, or maybe just someone who focuses just on the grief aspect.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something, it's like I love the term shorten the curve. I had to figure all of that out on my own. It's a very long process. So not that you help people move on from their grief, but maybe shorten the curve of how they can acknowledge their grief. And if they don't have that, or, you know, it doesn't have to be death, but whatever, but also make strides in their own life.
Exactly.
What that looks like. I love it. Yeah. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, because it's a huge roadblock, right? If we're carrying these emotional backpacks, that are just so heavy, imagine, right? To anyone listening, just imagine what it would feel like to take that backpack off.
So good.
And what becomes possible, what opportunities open up, right? When you can be like, oh, and that's exactly, I wish I could video the liberation I see shoulders drop, you know, like, oh, because they just feel, and there's so many cool stories of, you know, just these connections that then happen after, you know, of people like, I had one ages ago who gave me permission to share her story, but the gist of it is, had a really sour story about her stepmother taking the cottage from the kids when her father died. Mm-hmm. She did this work. And 2 weeks after that, the mother-in-law called. She's like, hey, I'm thinking of selling the cottage. Are you kids interested? And this had been like a decade of her being, right? Like her story of like, nah, she's horrible. And then she releases all this emotional pain. And then, whoop, oh, guess what? The thing you want is now available.
So just like you were saying, you realize how much energy it is and how much energy it takes to resist also too.
Yeah. It's more energy to resist.
Yeah.
Sometimes we also acknowledge the fear that comes with that. Because again, we were not taught the tools to deal with this. So it can feel very,
daunting.
Yeah. To be like, oh, you want me to turn and look at this thing that I've been carrying for my whole life. And that's another fear, right? People often, well, who am I going to be if I let go of this pain?
Yes, right. That's a big one. Yeah, even if it's, we talk about it all the time in our space, right? Even if it's negative comfort, it's comfort.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, you know, the little Linus's blanket, like just taking it everywhere and it's got that dust following it. Right.
Which is why I love this platform, right? Like your name of Give a Shift. Like it is like you have to give yourself permission to make that shift.
Yeah.
I don't want to carry this anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
We're trying to really set the tone of being in the do and being in the action of like, no matter where you are, someone can meet you where you're at and help you let go of that which no longer is serving you. And that's kind of why we wanted to build this platform and have people such as yourself on, where it's like, there is a go-to. You need somebody who's going to help you take off your backpack, which as a hiker, let me tell you, is the best in the freaking world. By the time you get to the top, okay, you are like, yes, that victory dance is amazing, right? Before you gotta put it back on, but you got half the water and half the snacks.
Yeah, so you got to go back down.
But I mean, getting to the top and having that celebratory dance and being able to say, like, I did that. I created this change. I finally got to let go or have the conversation or get in the new relationship or quit my job and be an entrepreneur, like whatever it is that was holding you back. But that's what it is. It's like loss will always be grief in that form. And I think that's one of those things where it's like, it's okay to say it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, it's part of a normal conversation. It is no different than waking up is dying, losing.
Well, that's why I jokingly say, I'm like, it's not a vampire. If you invite in and have a conversation, it's not going to kill you.
Yeah.
But that's again where our sweet little brains go. It's like, if I start this thing again, I'll fail and I'll end up, dying under the highway pass. And it's like, no. Let's talk about it. It's going to be something that will actually liberate you.
Yeah. Well, even people with doing their wills. I know people that have not done, they're my age, like hitting 60, haven't done a will because they think if they do the will, they're writing their death sentence. And I'm like, it doesn't work like that. Not how it works. No. And they're like, it doesn't matter. I don't have much. I'm like, it matters. Like, it matters. And, but it's funny. They do people. Or I know people, I think something's wrong with me, but I'm not going to go to the doctor because every time I've heard so-and-so's gone to the doctor, they've been diagnosed with something wrong. And I'm like, well, if there might be something wrong. So avoiding it isn't going to make it go away. But those are honestly very legitimate conversations I have had with people. And I'm sure you have had them.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And the thing is, you just want to acknowledge those fears, right? Again, we're not judging anything on them. They are legit. And again, those are feelings that they have.
Yeah.
So understanding what that feeling is, where it comes from, is it true? And how can we move it so that you are able to move forward? I always think just back to, like sex education, right? Well, if you talk to kids about it, everyone's going to get pregnant.
Everybody was like, ew, no, now that I know, get away from me.
Right. And that's the same thing for me with death, right? Because again, 100% of us, one day, we don't know when, none of us know when, it's going to happen. So the more we can talk about it with our loved ones, of people that we trust, and actually I'll share a little story. So I went to a death symposium years ago, and there was an Irish, blanking on his name. Anyways, he was talking about in his little island off the coast of Ireland, and I'm part Irish. I didn't know any of this story, but what they do, it's a ritual called keening, and it's generally done by women. So he was talking about his father, who was actively dying. And again, we kind of know the stages. The body knows what it's doing. So when the death rattle starts, the main keener was singing this song. And I think it was sounded like a biblical verse. I don't know if it was, but anyway, she sings the song, and then the next woman would join in, and the next woman. And this becomes kind of the siren call to the community.
Wow.
Once people hear the song, everyone drops what they're doing. It doesn't matter if you know the person who is dying or not. You keep following the song and you get to the home. And he said, it's the most beautiful thing. So he looked up and he's like, there was 500 people. Didn't matter if I'm visiting and, Alicia in this town. And it's like, nope, everyone, we got to go. And
wow.
What's beautiful is that you're singing them through their transition, and you're actually witnessing death. Because in our society, it's the thing that happens. Like if you're in a nursing home, literally the bodies go out the back of the building. No one ever has, and it's such an honor if you ever, I was able to help my grandmother through hers. Like, it's such a beautiful, it can be a very beautiful, obviously not everyone's is like that. But the more, to his point, is like the more we're familiar with what is naturally going to happen, the fear of that lessens.
Mm-hmm.
Which is understandable. He's like, by the time, you go through, he's like, with my father, he's like, I had been to hundreds of these. So I kind of knew what to expect. It's like, I always say, like, birth and death are the same transitions, right? It's like the what to expect when you're expecting. Yeah. How revolutionary that book was, because finally someone had put pen to paper about what it is to, have, be pregnant and give birth. The same is now starting with a death positive culture of those conversations happening. Here's generally so, because a lot of that fear is there going to be pain?
Mm-hmm.
What will happen? And again, everyone's obviously unique in what will happen for them, but there are certain things that we can talk about and prepare for, and again, communicate to our loved ones. And that's where like the DNRs come in. I don't give me all those life-saving measures. I don't want that. But so many, to your point, Nancy, are avoiding any of those conversations.
Yeah.
It's like, well, then if something happens and I'm your care, provider, how do I know what you would want?
This is not an ignorance is bliss section of life.
Yeah.
There's no, it doesn't work that way. And I think it's important to note that, I mean, I do use the word blessed. I didn't feel blessed at the beginning, but I have held my husband's hand as he passed away. I held my fiance's hand as he passed away. I held my mother's hand as she passed away. I was there in that moment. And I think there's a huge difference between knowing the blessing of being able to do that doesn't mean you're happy. It doesn't mean, okay, that was great. You still feel all the feels. I mean, with my husband, I was, single mom, young son. I mean, I was not happy. But when I look back, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful I was there. And not everybody gets that chance, right? We have tragic deaths, we have accident deaths, and, so it's all very different. But I think overall the conversation is, even in those moments, it doesn't, like, we're not telling people, okay, you got to be there at the transition, you're lucky, be happy now, and go on. We still have to deal with all the grief that comes and follows. But
exactly. And it's honoring all the emotions
that
show up. And that's the thing, because with grief, it's often conflicting emotions. There might be some relief, especially if they've been, with a long disease, and it's like, oh, okay, and immense sadness, right? And these can all coexist. It's not a binary thing here. And thank you, for really pointing that out, right? Like, it's not like, yay, it's just that if you can be present, and again, that's why I just shared the story of the Irish of that, because you are present to that. That then there becomes a familiarity, it's like, oh, okay.
And then for those that have a loved one that passes away in a tragedy or, accident like that, what is different? Like, how do you help them differently, maybe? Or is there a different, like, obviously, because I think that's a totally different you're both grieving. It's not a comparison. I tell people it's not a comparison. We're not like who's more grieving more, but it is different. There's different.
I would say, as somebody who's had and lost, like, when people joke like, let's go see your family, I'm like, okay, well, which cemetery? Because like, they got half over here and half over, like, this is not something that I'm not familiar with. Like, I'm fascinated by people that haven't had a lot of loss or some people at all. But from somebody who's gone from a tragic event loss to being able to hold my grandma's hand and be like, oh, grandma just took her last breath with me. I'm so special. Like, that was so cool, right? Like, I'm the chosen one. So I treated it, but it was like, I think being there's an element of like comfort because you can see it. I think when it's a trauma that you're not expecting, or it comes as such radical news, or it's out of left field, or it wasn't something that you could prepare for or that you saw coming, it really does have a more dire feeling to it that I think lingers a little differently than if someone is like, oh, I'm really glad that my uncle is no longer suffering from leukemia. Like, as hard as it was, to be there also for his last breath, that's like, there's this relief. Whereas when it's traumatic, you're like, how do I even process that? Like, where do you start to process that? So I think for myself, having run the gamut or the spectrum, I would much prefer to be in the know. Has helped me process the grieving over time and be like, okay, like I think I did better with my dog than I thought, because I was like, okay, Motley, you were sick and I was able to help you cross over, versus your dog gets hit by a car.
Yeah.
And you didn't, you know what I mean? For those of us with pet parents out there.
And that's where rituals really come in. Because I think, with the tragic losses, it's a condensed timeline, right? And you're like, and your soul has to catch up to the timeline. So, and it's actually been shown too, again, in studies, that it's not so much the funerals and the community gatherings, it's those personal rituals. So maybe writing a letter, saying all the things you didn't get to say because it was this tragic event. So those are the things that we can do to help us process more. And obviously, as you alluded to, Alicia, like there's a whole gamut of emotions that come up in those, because with anticipatory grief, when there's something that you're expecting happen, again, they've been sick, now they're in hospice, okay, it's imminent. There's a grief that happens earlier. And then again, with the tragic, like an accident or that sort of thing, again, it's that condensed timeline that you're like having to just find your grounding, because you're like, well, I just saw them yesterday.
Right.
What do you mean? So a lot of different emotions that come up there. It could be a lot of guilt. I have a lot, as you can understand, grief and guilt are best friends, especially when it comes to things like suicide or that, where you're like, if I had just shown up more, if I was, I didn't, answer the call. And if I'd only been there, like there's just, again, all the different emotions that all just need to be seen and heard, and with a trusted, resource. So I really do want to caveat that, because again, we generally live in a grief illiterate society. So just like whoever you are choosing to share with, ensure they've earned the right to hear that story, because we all know how quickly it can shrink you if they're like, you're fine, or don't feel bad, they're in a better place, like all those things we talked about earlier.
Good point.
Yeah.
So on that note, how do people find you?
I am at innertravelcoaching.com. So everything's, I've moved my whole website from WordPress onto a new platform. So literally just yesterday.
Congratulations.
I'll get up some stuff here. So it's still being tweaked, but you'll get all the main information on there. And then, the coaching services or the grief gift boxes, like all those links are on there. And then, Inner Travel Coach on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay. I was going to say, so Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah, those are my main playgrounds. I toy with Pinterest a little bit, LinkedIn a little bit, but I'm mainly more about, again, these kind of conversations, because that's where the juice is.
It is. Nancy? Oh, is Nancy muted?
Oh, Nancy's muted. Yes.
So cute. She's talking.
She's like, why is no one listening to me?
She's like, my button is muted. Your mic. Watch. I'll be like, your mic is muted.
Yeah.
Tammy
and I are playing charades for those of us.
It reminds me, right, when everyone was Zooming in the pandemic.
That's why I was talking, and I'm like, why is Alicia saying goodbye? I'm saying something.
You don't have to say goodbye. I don't want you to grieve.
No, when you were asking where people could find her, and I'm like, wait.
I was like, wait, don't get this conversation. Ask all that you need to. No regrets. You know me. I'm all big about no regrets.
I
was just curious before we say goodbye if you run retreats.
Funny you ask, Nancy. That's on the radar for 2024. Yeah, because I did a little survey. People want community. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited.
I'm excited to facilitators.
Just saying. There's a lot to be said for getting out, right? Of just your normal and really, nurturing yourself. And I was actually talking to some therapists and other mental health providers who are just burnt out and they just want somewhere, right? And because they deal with a lot of loss. And so there's definitely a need. So thank you for asking that, because you reminded me that that's got to go back on my my forerunner. It's been on the back burner.
Yeah. Well, when I first got into this space, I was a realtor before. And when I first got into it, it was, I just found how fitness, I didn't work out. I didn't do things, but I found just how like working out was such good therapy. Like, and my whole thing for probably 2-3 years was fitness is therapy. I'm not trying to get a muscle. I'm not trying to do anything. It's just my therapy. And I always was like, oh, see, like, you know, we did grief retreats because I was, you know, I didn't market to women in grief, but that was what I talked about all the time. And I was still in real estate, so I was transitioning, but I think it's really important for people to have all the components, right? The mental, the physical, you know, to meet them where they're at on their journey and then as they progress, but it all works together. And I'm excited to see what you put together.
And I want our listeners to know I have worked with Tammy, and I want her to know that my bedspread right now, like, it's not perfect. I don't know if you remember the exercise, but for a week she was like, and I don't want you to make your bed. And I was like, look at her face. And I told her, I was like, our friendship is over. I'm going to have a panic attack. I'm freaking out right now. What do you mean? And she was like, no, I mean it. I don't want you to make your bed for a week and you will send me proof. And I was like, but it really does. I think it's such a testament to who she is as an individual, because she listens like no other, and she will see you deeper than you can see yourself. So if you can, and you have the opportunity and the chance to work with her, it's a game changer.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm just cracking it because I love Alicia and I know how she is with fonts. And so I can only imagine the bedspread.
Before we got on, she's like, how's it going? And I'm like, I've refonted the entire book. She's like, it's 88 pages. I was like, I know, I already did the 91 pages yesterday.
I'm like, oh my gosh. Tammy, I think we could chat with you for hours. Right. I love this topic. I love what you are, and I know Alicia does too, what you are gifting to the world with what you're able to do and work with people, and so that they can process their grief, and those that, you know, talk about death and talk about life, right? Like the talk about death, if you're helps you live a better life. And then if you are grieving, I can't wait for people to find you and know that you will be my #1 resource for anyone I know that probably needs both. Land somewhere.
And thank you for having a platform to talk about grief and death. Of course, because again, it needs more. It needs
a shift. Grief is a shift.
I was just going to say, I was like, how do I say it? Thank you. Yeah, grief.
It's a shift.
I'm like, grief is shift.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end. Thank you to all our listeners. We will have all the show notes. We will have where you can follow Tammy, where you can find Tammy, because every single one of us, we're going to need Tammy's service at some point. I mean, I think that's a given. So let's do it now while we can, and plan and prepare and talk about the things. And we'll have all that information in our show notes. So thank you. Be sure to like, subscribe, so we can keep bringing you more amazing guests like Tammy.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Bye.